भारत और यूरोपियन यूनियन के बीच एक बहुत बड़ा एग्रीमेंट हुआ है। दुनिया में लोग इसकी चर्चा मदर ऑफ ऑल डील्स के रूप में कर रहे हैं।
For decades after independence, India's trade strategy moved cautiously. The country opened its markets in phases, tested partnerships region by region, and often walked away from agreements that felt unbalanced. Europe, meanwhile, evolved into a powerful economic bloc. 27 countries operating as a single market, bound by shared regulations, industrial standards, and political weight. Talks between India and the European Union began years ago. They stalled. They restarted. They stalled again. Different governments, different priorities, different global crises. For a long time, the deal existed mostly as diplomatic paperwork and distant ambition. That changed recently. India and the European Union have now agreed on what is being described as the largest free trade agreement in India's history. Not because of symbolism, but because of scale. Together, India's 1.4 billion people and Europe's roughly 600 million create a combined market of about 2 billion consumers. No earlier Indian trade pact comes close to that reach. The agreement is signed, but not yet fully active. European ratification is still pending. Enforcement is expected around 2026. But politically and economically, the direction is set. The architecture is locked in. To understand why this matters, it helps to look at who India trades with most. The United States is India's single largest trading partner if measured country to country. But the European Union is not one country. It is a bloc of major economies: Germany, France, Spain, Italy, the Netherlands, and others acting together. When trade volumes are combined, India's trade with the EU surpasses its trade with the US. That is why this deal is being framed as historic. At the core of the agreement is tariffs. Both sides have agreed to slash or eliminate duties across a wide range of goods. For Indian consumers, this means European products will enter the market at significantly lower prices. Cars, chocolates, processed foods, machinery, and consumer goods from Europe will face far fewer barriers. Competition inside India will increase. Domestic companies will no longer be shielded by high import duties. European quality and pricing will sit directly beside Indian brands on shelves and in showrooms. That pressure is intentional. The expectation is that Indian manufacturers improve efficiency, raise quality standards, and innovate faster. The same logic applies in reverse. Indian goods will now access European markets with minimal or zero tariffs. This is not symbolic access, it is commercial access at scale. Machinery, electrical equipment, optical instruments, and medical devices that once faced tariffs as high as 27% to 44% will, in many categories, drop to zero. A product that previously sold for €127 because of duties can now sell for 100. That difference reshapes competitiveness overnight. Some of the sharpest changes are in sectors Europe dominates globally. Wine is one example. Imported European wine once faced tariffs of around 150% in India, turning a €100 bottle into a luxury priced near €250. Under the new framework, those duties are expected to fall into the 20 to 30% range. Spirits see similar reductions. Beer becomes cheaper. Olive oil and several vegetable oils move towards zero tariffs. Fruit juices, processed fruits, bread, biscuits, pasta, chocolate, and even pet food are expected to enter India without tariff barriers. European prices will increasingly look like European prices, not inflated import versions. But one of the most consequential impacts of the deal is not in Europe or India directly. It is in Bangladesh. Bangladesh's largest export sector is textiles. For years, it benefited from preferential access to European markets, making Bangladeshi garments cheaper than Indian ones. India's textile exports to the EU face tariffs of around 12%. That disadvantage is now gone. Tariffs on Indian textiles have dropped to zero. India's major textile hubs, Tamil Nadu, Gujarat, Maharashtra, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, and West Bengal, are positioned to receive a surge of European orders. Cost competitiveness now favors India, and quality already does. This shifts the balance of global textile sourcing. Bangladesh feels that pressure immediately, even though it is not part of the agreement. Behind the economics sits geopolitics. International media coverage of the deal has focused less on India and Europe and more on Washington, specifically on how the United States responds. The context matters. The United States recently imposed additional tariffs of around 25% on Indian goods, citing India's continued purchase of Russian oil and gas amid the Russia-Ukraine war. American officials argued these measures were part of broader pressure on Russia. Then Europe signed a trade deal with India. Scott Bessent, the U.S. Treasury Secretary, publicly expressed frustration. His argument was blunt. The United States imposed costs on itself and on India to weaken Russia's war capacity, while Europe continued to buy refined products derived from Russian oil processed in India, and then expanded trade with India.
That he has worked to negotiate a settlement on Russia-Ukraine. The U.S. has made much bigger sacrifices than the Europeans have. We have put 25% tariffs on India for buying Russian oil. Guess what happened last week? The Europeans signed a trade deal with India. And just to be clear again, the Russian oil goes into India, the refined products come out, and the Europeans buy the refined products. They are financing the war against themselves. So President Trump's leadership, we will eventually end this Ukraine-Russia war.
Anyway, in that framing, Europe was benefiting economically while the U.S. absorbed political and financial costs. The message was not subtle. Washington was caught off guard. That tension now sits unresolved. Donald Trump's reaction remains unpredictable. He has a record of approving deals publicly and criticizing them later, sometimes within hours, often on social media. The logic problem for the U.S. is difficult to ignore. If Europe, the region most affected by the Ukraine war after Ukraine itself, is comfortable deepening trade with India, the justification for punitive tariffs weakens. Beyond trade, the India-EU relationship is widening. Defense cooperation discussions are advancing. Strategic coordination is increasing. Symbolism has also played a role. Antonio Costa, president of the European Council, publicly highlighted his overseas citizen of India status, a designation given to people with ancestral ties to India. He is Portuguese, not Indian, but his roots connect him to the country. That moment resonated politically. Other European leaders openly referenced deep personal or historical links to India. Ursula von der Leyen's presence in India as a chief guest reinforced the message. Europe was signaling that it would not accept pressure tactics quietly. If traditional alliances became restrictive, alternatives would be explored. Indian officials have avoided explicitly linking the deal to U.S. policy. Publicly, they insist negotiations were independent and long-running. That is technically true, but the timing tells its own story. Negotiations that dragged on for years accelerated rapidly over the past 6 months. The deal closed at record speed. Trade threats change incentives. This agreement fits squarely into India's broader foreign economic strategy, what analysts describe as a middle power approach. India is not positioning itself as a rigid bloc leader or ideological enforcer. Instead, it builds bridges across power centers. The objective is access, employment, and growth. Russia, China, Europe, the United States, engagement remains open with all. The calculus is transactional, not emotional. If a partnership delivers jobs, market access, and industrial expansion, it is pursued. That philosophy is visible in numbers. Over the past 6 years, India has signed multiple free trade agreements with regions and countries across Asia, the Middle East, and now Europe. The EU agreement is the largest among them, but not the first. It represents momentum, not a pivot. The immediate reality is this. Tariffs fall, prices adjust, supply chains realign, and competitive pressure intensifies. Some industries benefit instantly, others face disruption. Regional economies outside the deal feel indirect shockwaves. And above all, global trade politics become less centralized. The assumption that economic gravity flows through a single capital no longer holds. Markets are fragmenting, alliances are diversifying, and in that environment, scale matters more than sentiment. 2 billion consumers sit inside one trade framework. That fact alone changes how power is distributed. Thank you for listening. If you like our documentary video, please like and subscribe.